Welcome back, guys. Today we're going to continue our conversation on Lua controllers. Let's get started. Alright, so here I am on my laptop, and basically the same screen you see, desktop, and we're going to hit the mind test icon and load up the world 2021. Okay, so we have so far covered inputs and outputs. Now I'm not talking about all the inputs and outputs. I'm just talking about the very basics. There are several other inputs that you can, well, there's a handful of other inputs that you can input and a handful of outputs that I haven't covered yet. We will probably talk about those at some point, but I don't know at what point in the future. So right now we're going to talk about integrating if statements into our Lua controller. So if you don't recall, we covered it in about three lessons ago. I will put the link of it somewhere. I don't know where, but on the screen you'll see there's a link to the lesson where we covered if statements, Lua if statements for the Lua controller. And this is where you can really appreciate that the Lua controller actually runs Lua. And that's something to bear in mind, is that the more you know about Lua, the more capability and more possibilities you have with this controller. Now, it's not going to give you admin privs or anything like that, because anything that is run in this Lua controller is sandboxed, which means it only happens within its own little sphere of influence, which is probably just this area right here. And so you're not going to get admin privs, but you can write a lot of Lua code. And certainly understanding Lua is an important part, and one of the reasons why I'm even talking about Lua controllers, because it's a great way to kind of just start toying around with code and just seeing an output. And before I get into the actual if statements, I want to touch on that real quick. So here we have a certain syntax that is important. We have this leading word followed by another word with a dot notation. So you have port.a, port.b, port.c, port.d. And this is a very, like I said, very important part of mind test. And what this is referring to is a variable type. Now, so far we've talked about strings, which was like words, and integers, which are numbers. Well, there's another type of variable called a table. And that's exactly what these things are. These inputs and outputs are tables. And this is port exposed for the whole world to see. The true identity of port. And so we can see here that port is some sort of variable that holds a lot of information. And there's a certain syntax that you have to use in order to define port. So it starts with these curly braces, one starting and one closing all of this information. And we see some familiar things. For instance, A, B, C, and D. Don't miss that each of these different parts of port are separated by commas. And so, and then of course we have some sort of value that's assigned to each of the parts of port. So port has a bunch of different values, a bunch of different information that it holds. So that's one thing I just wanted to touch on briefly before moving on to the if statements. Pin is the same way. It's also a table which holds information. So, yeah. Now, let's talk about if statements. Okay, now this is actually something that you want to type. I'm sorry if you typed all that last time. I just wanted to show you that. So, right now we're going to actually type out the if statement. Now, we do that by, let's set up the skeleton, which is if then end. That is the skeleton of our if statement. And if you remember, between the if and the then, that is where we made our test. We tested certain things. Now, what do we want to test? Well, we probably want to test inputs. So we're going to say if pin.d equals, and this time we have to use the correct relational operator. And so we're just going to start with the basics. Double equal. So we're saying if pin.d equals true, then let's go to the end of then, press and enter. And I like to indent just a little bit. Tab does not work in the Lua controller, so three spaces is good. That'll also work. We're gonna set port.a equal to if I could hit that, equal to true, and that we'll see what that does. What should we expect for it to do? So we've got pin D, we're testing it. If pin D equals true, which we can switch that on, then port.a equals true. So that should work. Let's press execute, check for any bugs. We don't see any bugs. We're gonna press the escape key to get out of the Lua controller, and then let's try it out. So if we hit the switch as we expected, it tested to see the state of pin D, and it set port A to true because it was pin D was true. Now let's turn the switch off. And it works correctly. Now I should have. I was wanting to show you something that you need to understand about the if statement. And in order to show you that, we need to comment out or delete the line just above our comment. And that would be the second line, changing the state of port A. And I went ahead and added another comment here just to help keep things organized. If statements in just above our if statement. Now if we press execute, we go back out, we hit this switch, it turns on, and a little bit less expected, it doesn't turn off. We turn this back on, off, and nothing happens. Why is that? Why isn't it turning off? Well, if we look at our code, nowhere in our code do we tell the Lua controller to turn port A off or to false. We never do. We only tell it to turn port A on if an input is detected. And so it did exactly what it was supposed to do. So what can we do to rectify this? Well, there are several different clever things that you can do to change the state of port A back to off. And some of those things I would highly recommend investigating, checking out, and we'll get there. But for now, what I want to do is remind you of the else. The else addition of the if statement. So the else is the condition. If pin D is not equal to true, then, so if this comes out to be false, right? Pin D equals true. Well, is that a true or false statement? Well, it's actually false in certain cases. And in that case, if it is a false statement, then we want to come down here to the else, and we want to write port.a equals false. Now, if we press execute, we will notice backslash up arrow to get the time. Okay, it's not there anymore, so we get time 6000 for all of you who need that. Then we're going to hit the switch, and what do you know, lo and behold, it turns on and it turns off. So that's working as we expected. Now, something that I think would be kind of fun to mess around with is, and this could be useful in a greiffer trap and things like that, that when it's tripped, it stays tripped and it doesn't revert back to its original state unless it is released. So let's think about that. This works well for this if we go back to the way it was, and it'll say it'll execute when you flip this switch, bam, it turns on, and it doesn't matter what you do to the switch, nothing will happen. So, but how about we add a release over here? So this is pin D or pin C, so that when we hit pin C, it deactivates pin A. So it turns pin A off if pin C equals true, then port A equals false. So that's something that I want you to figure out and do. That, and also I want to tell y'all about something that is pretty cool. It is called Ghost Stone. You can see here there's two very similar ones. Remove Stone is once it's activated, it goes away forever. And Ghost Stone actually reappears. So, quick demonstration. So let's say you made a pit and you turn the signal on and off. I don't know if you can tell, but I've got one sitting, and you have to come in at the side. You can't just come up in from the top. Then you can all of a sudden drop the floor on somebody and cause them to fall. So that's an idea for a greeper trap. I think that'd be fun to see what you guys come up with. Some sort of greeper trap where when it's triggered, it will drop them. Then once the release is activated, it will let them out. Something like that. I don't know. So yeah, show me how to get C to release, and then also build like a simple little greefer trap. Thanks for watching, guys. I'll talk to you next time.